You're now watching Sports Bettors Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.
All right, Jimmy Ott and Paul Stone getting you another college football preview from a betting perspective. Paul, let's start off with, we're going to do the ACC, but we're going to start off with the big boy that plays 6 ACC games. That's right, Stanford is an ACC game. I had to remind myself of that as I was looking at their schedule. But the schedule is the deal here. I mean, to me, 8 layups. I mean, Northern Illinois, Purdue, Miami, Ohio. Purdue's over-under is 4 this year. Miami, Ohio, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Virginia, and Army. So they start the season at College Station and end the season at the Coliseum against USC. Well, A&M's projected to finish around 9 in the SEC. USC, 6 in the newly expanded Big Ten. And then they've got home games against Florida State and Louisville, which to me are the only teams that could present any type of challenge to them in South Bend. Your thoughts on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish?
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, one thought early on during summer camp, they lose their projected starting left tackle, Charles Jagasaw, tears a right pectoral muscle, and they were already having to replace 2 big-time offensive tackles there at Notre Dame. Left tackle Joe Alt, he was the 5th overall pick in the NFL draft, whom Jagasaw was replacing at left tackle. And then right tackle Blake Fisher, he was a 2nd-round pick in this last April's NFL draft. So losing a lot of talent there, having to kind of rebuild the offensive line, starting at those tackle positions. I'd heard one Notre Dame insider after Jagasaw's injury said that he was the top offensive lineman in the program. So that's a big blow to them right off the bat. You look at this Notre Dame team, first of all, you have to talk about the addition of former Duke quarterback Riley Leonard at quarterback, a true dual threat guy. We saw him last year in the season opener there in Durham as they upset Clemson. He's just a gritty player. I think he's going to upgrade that position significantly over Sam Hartman. Still a question about his health. He's had the ankle issues at the end of last year. He's had multiple surgeries. They say he's ready to go, but that's always kind of the company line. So we'll see how he looks physically when they travel into College Station the night of August 31st, coming up here shortly. Got a relatively easy schedule, as you noted. They open at A&M, really almost a must-win game for their playoff hopes on August 31st. And then they have the home games against Louisville and Florida State, as you mentioned, the road game to end the season at USC. Another game, and I'm not saying they're going to lose it because they're going to be more than a 2-touchdown favorite, but Georgia Tech's going to have a really salty offense. So the Ramblin' Wreck, they're at least a wild card. They at least have a prayer there. But this Notre Dame team, I don't really have a strong opinion on them. I do think they have to go 11-1 to make the playoff, even with that Notre Dame brand. I think if they go 10-2, they're really going to put their hopes in the hands of the committee, and it could get, even though they do have obviously one of the biggest brands, if not the biggest brand historically in college football, they would kind of be on some thin ice there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, it tells me all I need to know about their schedule. You're making a case for Georgia Tech being you're trying to find a game where it could be tough. The Army and Navy are just not what they used to be. Maybe the change of rules. Maybe they're trying to change their offense in what it is. But those schools always, especially Navy, would give Notre Dame a little bit of a fight. But at Bet Rivers, they're over under. You could bet 9, but minus 305. We don't want to get into that. Over 10. Minus 125, and then under 10 is plus 100 at Bet Rivers. I just see 10-2 all over this one. Maybe split. The Florida State Louisville, maybe split trips to A&M and USC, and gives them a little room for error if they win an extra one there. But I want to go back to what you said about Sam Hartman though and Riley Leonard. I know they're different style of quarterbacks. Hartman lets the ball go a little bit more. Leonard wants to run a little bit more. Great athlete. If you saw the Clemson game, he beat Clemson more with his legs than he did with his arm. Got hurt last year, and with his kind of running style, but he doesn't have a ton of weapons. They're not typical Notre Dame at the wideout position or the tight end. And it just seems like the defense is going to have to carry this one. And maybe Riley Leonard's going to be kind of a one-man show with their offensive approach when they do have those games that can those opponents that can provide some sort of opposition.
Yeah, I tell you, Mitchell Evans, the tight end, who's coming off injury as well, I think he's going to have to come up big for the Irish this year. As you mentioned, the lack of clear-cut, easily identifiable wide receiver threats. So Mitchell Evans, a highly recruited tight end who's certainly shown some glimpses of potential greatness. And I think if he's healthy, he could be Leonard's go-to guy. And I think he needs to be maybe a 50-catch type tight end for the Irish to flourish in that passing game.
Why do you like Leonard better than Hartman?
Hartman has an extremely high interception rate. I was trying to get it here, and you got to take care of the football. And Leonard can run the football. And I'm not saying Sam Hartman. He wasn't. He definitely wasn't below average, a Power 5 major college quarterback. But Leonard takes care of the ball better. I think Leonard's got a little more moxie. I do still have questions about that ankle. And the running game, that component is such a big part of Leonard's game. Even if he's quote-unquote healthy, he may be a little bit hesitant to run the ball. You've got in the back of your mind, mentally and maybe even physically a little bit what that ankle can do or what might happen, those types of things. He's gone through multiple surgeries. Done a lot of rehabilitation, so hopefully he's 100%. They can do some incredible things now with the surgical techniques and so forth. So
I had an idea that's what you were going to say, because we touched on that last year, coming from Wake Forest to Notre Dame, and the Irish were ecstatic because Hartman was an upgrade of what they had at the position before, but the interceptions were something that you had to factor in when you're talking about Sam Hartman. Let's move on and talk about the Pitt Panthers. Pat Narduzzi, 10th year with the Panthers. Some Boo Birds coming down a little bit when they got a little aggravated at home last year. Narduzzi kind of coined them the Boo Birds. But Pitt, they're over-under win total 5.5, under -125 at Bet Rivers.
Yeah, I mean, in college football with the transfer portal and with NIL, the rich are going to get richer and the other teams are going to fall further behind. And not only the group of 5 teams, but I think some of the second division teams in conferences are teams that fail to fully embrace the transfer portal and NIL. And I think Pitt kind of seems to fall into that category. I mean, they just don't have many frontline players. They're coming off a 3-9 season, I believe. You look at the first 4 teams in a preseason magazine publication, and Pitt only has 1 player on the first 4 teams, offense and defense. So that just shows you, kind of demonstrates the lack of top-shelf players that they have. Their starting quarterback, Nate Yarnell, was a pretty significant recruit, but he's only started 3 games, so the jury's still out on him. Their top running back, Rodney Hammond, he's gained over 1,500 yards in his career, but only averaged 4.6 yards per carry, so he doesn't have much breakaway threat there. Their top returning receiver, only 44 receptions last year. Their top sack man on defense, only 3 sacks. So there's not a whole lot coming back, and especially concerning on that defense, because that's kind of been their calling card in recent years. That's Pat Narduzzi's side of the ball, but I've seen a decline there the last couple of years. I expect additional decline this year. They opened the season with a layup against Kent State and a likely victory over FCS Youngstown State in week 2. But other than that, they might only be favored in one other game, that being in November 9th, home date against Virginia. Midseason home games against Cal and Syracuse, virtual toss-up. So it's just hard to see Pitt going 6-6, and that's what they have to do for us to lose this ticket. So I'll take Pitt under 5.5. I think it's another sub-500 regular season for the Panthers. Under 5.5 there, -1.25 at Bet Rivers.
All right, so under 5.5, Pitt is -125 right now at Bet Rivers. You talking about schedules, but the Miami Hurricanes, they're one of the teams that have been very active in the transfer portal, the NIL budget, and this was kind of expected, where with them where they're located. But I mean, even Mario Cristobal, who we know has just thrown multiple games away, whether it was last year against Georgia Tech or when he was at Oregon against Stanford, and man, he underutilized Justin Herbert when he was at Oregon. But even Cristobal is he's going to win more 9 games in this schedule. I mean, could be favored in all 12 games, Paul. I mean, you look at their schedule. I mean, the only 2 that they have a chance not to be favored in, at Louisville and hosting Florida State. I mean, when we get to those, and those are, games 7 and 8 on the schedule, we'll see how things are going. But this team is talented, and by everybody's account. And so They, Van Dyke is gone. They bring in Cam Ward from Washington State, who was erratic in Pullman, but he is a dual threat quarterback. But I mean, they just are better, talent wise. I mean, head and shoulders talent wise than so much of their competition. At Florida is going to be tricky because I would much rather play Florida where Florida State does after that brutal schedule and getting banged up than they do in the opening game. Mertz is Mertz turned the corner. I didn't think he was capable of playing at that level that he played last year, and he came back. So, the former 5-star recruit showed you maybe why he was recruited, that heavily. But after that, man, which is a tricky game, kind of a toss-up game in the swamp. I mean, first game of the season. But still, they have so many things in place. Over 9 is minus 125. I think it's light. If this team goes 8-4 with this schedule and this roster, then they're going to start looking at Mario Cristobal. And he continues even after, opposing coaches are using, man, the guy can't even run the clock out at the end of the game. Do you really want to go play for a guy who's going to throw away games? You saw the linemen on the sideline were going nuts when they fumbled the ball. But the whole thing is just this just looks like a mismatch with this roster against much of their competition. This is my favorite pick of the ACC. Over 9, minus 125. Paul, you like one also, them to make it to the playoff as well at a price at plus 225 at Bet Rivers.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this ACC, first of all, and I think they're getting 2 teams in the playoff. I just think that's how it's going to work out outside of something really extraordinary. And likely those two playoff teams are going to come from Florida State, Clemson, and Miami. Louisville would probably like to have a word, as well as a few others like SMU and perhaps Virginia Tech and North Carolina State. But I think it's either going to be the 2 of these teams, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, going to make the playoff. And I think Miami's going to be one of those teams. Like you said, this is a team that's going to be favored in at least 10 of their 12 regular season games. They host Florida State right now, about a 2-point underdog. They don't draw Clemson. They could be favored in all 12 games, as you said. So it's a very favorable schedule. It's a top 10 roster. There's no question about it. I was joking with somebody earlier in the week or last week perhaps that, Mario should probably just drive the bus to the stadium, park it legally, and maybe just stay in the bus and say, I'll see you guys in 5 hours. Good luck. Maybe bring me something at halftime. That might be the way to go. But, players play and coaches coach, and hopefully they won't have the snafus that have literally cost them victories like we saw last year in the Georgia Tech game. They clearly won the portal. I don't know if anybody did a better job in the portal than Miami. They obviously have quite the NIL program there in South Beach and an attractive backdrop as well to work with. You mentioned Cam Ward from the Houston area, started his career at Incarnate Word, then to Washington State, and now to Miami. He's a guy, he's got to play a little bit better. It's not like he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in college football or anything to that level. Not that he might not be with some of the supporting cast that he has. And one of those supporting cast members comes from Oregon State, running back Damian Martinez. This is another guy from the state of Texas, from the DFW area, who was not recruited by some of the big guys there in the state of Texas. And Mr. Martinez might be saying, what do you think of me now? Because he's a downhill runner.
Oh, he's a good back.
He's a tough guy. He can tote the rock. I mean, I like he's the kind of guy that can bring a little bit of culture, a little bit of leadership to that program. Defensively, they had Simeon Barrow at defensive tackle from Michigan State, Tyler Barron from Tennessee at defensive end, who can rush the passers. So just throughout the lineup, they fortified that roster. So I like Miami to make the playoff at plus 200. And if you don't mind, I was probably remiss. I was going to talk about West Virginia at Pittsburgh in the game of the year line, backing up to the Pitt Panthers and their friendly rival there in the backyard.
September 14th.
All the West Virginia Mountaineers. So I'll just kind of blend into this one real quick. But you look at that Pitt offense, first of all. I talked about the defense when I talked about their under 5.5 regular season win total. But Pitt, they averaged, of course, they had the good quarterback, the real talented quarterback in 21, but averaged 41.4 points in 21, 31.3 in 22, and only 20.2 last year in year 2023. and only 17.9 points per game last year versus FBS teams. So this offense has really taken a turn for the worse. West Virginia on the other sideline, they got a veteran quarterback, a bulldog of a quarterback in Garrett Green. He can run the football. He's a competitor. He really loves the game. They have a solid running back room as well. Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson, they combined for over 1,600 yards last year. And they've got a top 10, top 15 top offensive line. They returned 113 career starts, only gave up 10 sacks last year. A lot to like about this West Virginia team. And another thing I think that kind of is in West Virginia's corner in this game, which will be played in week 3, is the fact that West Virginia opens the season against Penn State. They could upset Penn State, but they likely are going to lose that game. They don't want to go 1-2, so they're already going to be on the ropes a little bit. They're going to be firing their best shot. I like West Virginia -5 at Pittsburgh there at Bet Rivers in the game of the year markets.
Yeah, that game last year, the first game, in Happy Valley, West Virginia, they opened up and they hung around. The Mountaineers hung around in that game, and that was a James Franklin going out of his way to cover at the end. A special there. But back at home, that's going to be a fun one to open up the season at West Virginia. So. In Green, he's got some weapons on the outside to throw the ball to, Paul. 16-4 touchdown interception ratio last year, rushed for 822 yards. Yeah, he's a tough guy, and he's back. And I'm glad that the West Virginia administration was patient with Neil Brown. He is a guy that's popular within the industry, the coaching industry. And they just thought if he had to, things felt a 9-4 season, and now they've got something to build upon. So, no, this West Virginia is one of those teams that they talk about a lot in the Big 12 that got a lot of balance, a little bit of dangerous this year for West Virginia. So, Paul likes West Virginia -5 against Pitt there. Let's move on to we were talking about Miami. You talked about Florida State. The only game currently, some outlets have them. Florida State is a 2-point favorite on that October 26th game in Miami. By the time they play, Miami could be the favorite. But you're looking at the more wins feature at Bet Rivers. A lot of fun we've had with these. And this one is Utah versus Florida State, who's going to have the most wins. So Utah coming into Big 12, they're the favorite. In the Big 12, they have a trip to Oklahoma State, but then they might be favored in just about every one of their rest of their games. And in Florida State, Florida State's going to be good. They're going to Norvell knows how to work the transfer portal. What do they have? 17 of their 22 starting on opening day were from the transfer portal. He knows how to utilize it, but is he going to have that many hits? That many guys that play well out of the transfer portal again? I'd say probably not. But they're still going to be pretty good preseason, number 10. But you like the Utes to have more wins than the Seminoles this year.
Yeah, Utah's -130 to have more regular season wins than Florida State there at Bet Rivers. And looking at the teams, first of all, in my power ratings, I have Florida State number 9. I have Utah number 18. So as is often the case when we're looking at these regular season win totals, it comes down to the schedule. And you mentioned it about Utah. They are right now probably likely a small dog in Stillwater at Oklahoma State on September 21st. But they could very well be favored in their 11 other regular season games. Their first-year schedule in the Big 12 really sets up nicely for the Utes. Obviously, a lot is hinging on the health of Cam Rising. I think everybody's kind of taking it for granted that he's 100% healthy, and they're talking, that's the company line, that he is healthy and he's ready to go. But he hadn't played a football game in 20 months. And last year we got treated to the weekly, he's questionable, and he never showed up and played. So he wasn't able to play last year, obviously wasn't healthy enough. And, hopefully for college football's sake and certainly for his sake, he's going to be full steam ahead there for the Utah Utes. But Florida State, a significantly more difficult schedule. I saw one publication that rated Florida State's schedule the 12th most difficult in all of college football. That same publication ranked Utah's schedule 59th. So that shows you the disparity in these two teams' schedules. You got a Florida State team that's got to travel to SMU, Miami, Florida, and Notre Dame, not to mention home games against Clemson and Florida, who could be a game opponent as well. So I think Utah's going to win more games in the regular season than Florida State, laid -130 there at Bet Rivers to have more regular season wins.
All right, yeah, and probably the downside, and we're excited about this college football season because you're going to see the Oregon, Ohio States, and the Penn State USC's, and Oklahoma Bamas, and Texas Georgias, and all those. We're excited, but the downside obviously is Oregon. So what happened to Oregon State and Washington State? Could their quarterbacks have gone any farther away from those schools to play than Tallahassee and in Coral Gables? So there you go. All right, let's move on. We talked about the Louisville Cardinals a little bit, and Jeff Brom, not bad. His first year back home, huh? Gets him in the ACC championship game. Their total is at 8.5 right now. And how about this? A seventh-year quarterback in Texas Tech transfer, Tyler Shaw. And so the roster will only be more complete. You know how in this transfer portal, when there's a coaching change, man, they raid your roster. For when you don't have a coach, you got the interim coach, and they're not raiding you for your weaker players. So, he's only going to be, this roster can only be better, and I just think he obviously knows the the Kentucky coaches, the whole bit. They have 5 competitive games at Notre Dame, at Clemson, at Kentucky. Enough said. Those are going to be challenging. Not like they can't compete in those games and possibly win. Maybe 1, possibly 2. 1 would be nice. And then they host Miami and SMU at home. That's the 5. The other 7, I feel really comfortable. Give me 2 out those 5, and I get over 8.5 at a plus price at plus 140 is why I like Louisville. Try a little bit more continuity with Jeff Brom back home in Louisville, where he played, with the dad coach, the whole deal. And, man, I think they got a little momentum built with the Cardinals program right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he did an excellent job last year with the Cardinals in that first year back in Louisville. Got an excellent defense. Tyler Shuff obviously needs to stay healthy. He's had some injury concerns throughout his career, so that's kind of the wild card there. But I like this Louisville team, and I think, again, that conference behind the top 3 that we talked about a minute ago, kind of that 4 spot is there for the taking, and Louisville certainly could be the team to get there. And one thing that you added certainly as part of your reason for liking the Cardinals, that plus money is attractive. You got to look at that minus and that plus. Plus 140 is a lot different than minus 140. So if they get to 9-3 or better, you'll be in good shape there with the Cardinals.
All right, let's move on. A little double barrels, not just Chick-fil-A and Raising Cane's that have the double barrel drive-through. Got a little double barrel pick for both Paul and I on this one. This time last year, I loved the Duke Blue Devils. I mean, they're 2 deep last year. They had like 37 juniors, seniors, or redshirt seniors on that 2 deep last year. Riley Leonard, Elko is good. Well, they are all pretty much gone, including the coach. And now they're, and I looked at their win total, and, they could win some of those non-conference games. What was more attractive to me was the under 2.5 in the ACC games. So conference games under 2.5, that is minus 200. Got to lay a price right there. But the schedule, they play 5 of the top 6 teams in the ACC, and 3 teams coming off of bye games. So, Duke, I think they'll be at least 3-1 non-conference. So the conference total is something that attracted me a lot more. Even laying at $2, but I cashed in on Duke last year. This year I'm against them, Paul. You as well.
Yeah, we're laying a heavy price here at minus 200, so we have to feel very good about it. And I feel good that this Duke team, unfortunately, is going to win 2 or fewer games in the ACC. As you mentioned, they lose their head coach, Mike Elko, to Texas A&M. They lose their standout quarterback, Riley Leonard, to Notre Dame. The defense last year was kind of, as good as Leonard was, that defense was really salty. And a lot of those veteran players that you talked about were on the defensive side of the ball, and specifically in that defensive front 7. That defense allowed only 19 points a game last year on average. They lose their top 5 defensive linemen, so it's not going to be the same Duke defense that we saw last year. Malik Murphy going to be their quarterback, transfers in from Texas. I mean, he is a physical specimen. This guy is a true 6'4", 240. Nobody looks better going through the airport. But Mr. Murphy last year in a brief 2-game audition for Texas when Quinn Ewers was out with injury, he really didn't play all that well. He threw 3 interceptions in 2 games. It really easily could have been 5 or 6 interceptions. Really looked shaky in the passing game. And that was behind one of the best offensive lines in all of college football, with the receiving core and a supporting cast at the skill positions, one of the best groups there as well in college football. So I'm just not expecting much out of Malik Murphy until I see it on the field. You talked about the 8 conference games, and that's what we're looking at here at the under 2.5. Right now, my power ratings have them underdog in all 8 of their conference games. They're currently a small dog at home to North Carolina, a small dog at Wake Forest to end the regular season, maybe under a field goal in both those games, but fairly considerable underdogs in the other 6. I think they have to beat both North Carolina and at Wake Forest to even have a chance to get another victory. And to get another victory, it would be at Georgia Tech, Florida State at home, SMU at home, at Miami, Florida, at NC State, or at home against Virginia Tech. And I'm not sure which one of those games they win, if they do win the 2 games that they're a small dog in at this point. So I think Duke might be more likely to go, I hate to say it, but 0-8 than 3-5. This is a team that just lost so much. So I like Duke under 2.5 wins in the ACC at -200 there at Bet Rivers.
And in their non-conference schedule, Elon at Northwestern, UConn, and Middle Tennessee State. I'll say this, too. If they are able to, there's a chance they go 4-0 in that non-conference. So if they do, man, we are going to look to bet them, bet against them, fade them in that spot against North Carolina in a revenge spot for the Tar Heels. Speaking of the Carolina Tar Heels, how about this one? So their total is 7.5. Oh, Drake May's gone. Okay. Well, Mac Brown's still doing it, huh? And, man, Mr. February, he's still recruiting pretty doggone good. And that's enough to put out a decent roster where they can navigate their schedule. 6 of their 8 ACC games are in the bottom half of the league, the projected bottom half of the league. Yes, I'll give up at Florida State. I'll just give an L. I'll give an L to that one, all right? The other 11, they're going to be favored. They're going to be favored in the other 11 games. So you got a team that's going to be favored in 11 games, and the total is 7.5. I'm all over the Tar Heels. I've never been a big Max Johnson fan, but if you got experience starting at LSU and Texas A&M, you could play a little bit, huh? So, he's certainly been around, and you could do worse than Max Johnson. So I'll just say that. But, I just love the rivalry game against NC State's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt. NC State's got a chance to be pretty good with Grayson McCall coming over. But, they have them at home to end the season. If things go according to plan, they're going to be favored in 11 of 12. Tricky starter at Minnesota. Got to row that boat upstream. So, and that's a tricky one there. But at Minnesota, the opening weekend of college, I think it's a Thursday night game as well. So you get a lot of eyeballs on that game. We'll be over at Circa watching that game on Thursday night for the opening week of college football season. But anyway, North Carolina over 7.5, -125 at Bet Rivers right now.
Yeah, going to be interesting. Like you mentioned, that quarterback position is really going to be critical. Who wins that job? Looks like it's going to be Max Johnson. They've got the holdover Harrell as well at the quarterback position, but they do have a favorable schedule, at Minnesota to start the season, as you mentioned, and then hosting North Carolina State there at the end of the season. Those games are going to be, close to pick them. But like you said, they've just got such a comes down so much to just analyzing the schedule when you look at these regular season win totals, and they really have a favorable conference schedule and non-conference schedule. So, I certainly can't fault your thought there. And like you said, Mac just keeps doing it. He's in his 70s now. He obviously loves to coach, and his message still resonates with some of the young kids because he's still able to recruit, still able to attract players to his program, still able to sell his message. So going to be interesting to watch those North Carolina Tar Heels rather this season in the ACC.
Yes, indeed. All right, the ACC is done. We'll have the Big 12 later in the week. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here in the Sports Bettors Paradise on the Bet Rivers Network.